So welcome to my home office in Noto, Cape Town. I blurred the background because it's not pretty, so I'm just going to, gloss over that. I am here tonight to talk about self-empowerment. I'm talking to you from the role of being a mother and a wife and all those good things, but mainly I'm talking to you as a life coach and also a stage 4 cancer survivor. I'm sure many of you have come across people with cancer and perhaps you've had that yourself. So the title of my talk is Self-Empowerment Begins with Self-Care, or perhaps in a reverse way, does self-disempowerment begin with self-neglect? So my story, I think intuitively I knew that the lump was cancer. I'd spent enough time feeling it in the shower, and it was a small, hard lump in my right breast, gently pulling down at the skin above it. In mild panic, I wasn't too freaked out at that stage, I scheduled a mammogram for the next available slot at my local hospital. And when I was standing in front of the receptionist, I asked her, when was I here last for the last time I had a mammogram? And while she was looking it up on her computer, I thought to myself, oh, come on, when was it again, Alison? When was that? And thinking it through, and I was guessing in my mind that was probably about 3 years ago. Finally, she looked up from her computer and she said, 8 years ago, ma'am. 8 years ago. So that's not good, right? Especially at that time, this is 2019. My youngest son was 16 years old, which kind of meant that the last time I'd had a mammogram was when he was half his age. That was my last mammogram 8 years ago, and not great, especially when you know that they recommend mammograms for women every 3 years or so. That day was a blur. I had an ultrasound and a biopsy of said lump, and the next day I got the call from my very nice GP. I'm so sorry, Alison, but it is cancer. The words that precisely no one ever wants to hear, ever. But not to worry, she said, it's the friendly kind. Not really sure what that meant, but it was kind of nice at the time. And if you've ever heard those words or had a diagnosis like that, then you'll know how quickly the medical machinery kicks in. And the next month was a blur of shock, telling my friends and family, and a fair amount of self-recrimination for those missing mammograms. And the thought that I'd let myself down really plagued me through all the ensuing tests. While I was having the CT scan to see if it had spread and whether it had metastasized, I thought long and hard about how I'd neglected this essential checkup. Lying face down in the MRI tunnel, I asked myself really what on earth I had been doing instead of prioritizing self-care. Standing in front of the surgeon with my hand above my head while he marked on my breast in purple marker where the cutting lines would be, I thought about how important it is to catch cancer early and how I hadn't done that. When had I disempowered myself by abandoning self-care? Over the months after surgery, as I put together a treatment plan for myself, I felt a kind of anger bubbling up inside me. Not towards others, a little bit towards myself really, but towards the circumstances that had played a role in this self-neglect. How could I have let myself down so badly? And the answer is not easy, and perhaps it's common to all of us really, and perhaps this will resonate with you. I abandoned self-care really because I was busy. I was busy being a mom to 2 lovely boys. I had my own little business that I was running. I had a volunteer group that I was getting off the ground. And I was married, or I am still married, busy being a good friend. And I had gone back to school to retrain as a life coach. So I did not have time for self-care. And you get the picture. So when you are so busy taking care of everyone and everything else except yourself, you end up disempowering yourself and putting your needs on the back burner so that you can show up for others. Apparently, I got the memo which says that to be a good mother or friend or wife or daughter, you need to put your needs last. And then you get that fantastic label, which is you are selfless. Selfless. But in my case, I don't think my needs really made it onto the list at all. Because again, being so busy showing up for others, I just didn't show up for myself. So I don't know if any of you feel this way, but a question for you tonight is, when was your last mammogram or your last prostate or dental checkup or eye checkup or pap smear? Are you really busy and putting your needs last while you show up for others, disempowering yourself by abandoning self-care? And just as an aside, in case you think that I'm like this incredible angelic martyr, that's not how it was. In reality, how it was I was angry and grumpy and snarky, and my family knew at all times what mood I was in. I also dabbled in self-medication in the form of nice wooded Chardonnay for occasion, well, probably more than one occasion. I ate badly, I over-exercised, and I got too little sleep. And the strangest thing happened after all the hullabaloo had settled down and I'd recovered from the initial shock. I felt a kind of a different feeling inside me. It was like a sigh, a relaxing of my shoulders, and a kind of a still point in the storm. And it took me a while to work out what I was feeling, and eventually I was able to name it, and that feeling was relief. Relief. I wasn't relieved because I had cancer. No one feels that, but I was relieved because somehow my body had given me permission to stop. Like a football player on the field, I had been handed a red card and I had to step out of my life for a while. And that expression, stop the world, I want to get off, was very relevant for me. And finally, I was forced to bring my needs front and center with self-care. In her book, Untamed, Glennon Doyle, maybe you've read that book, it's a brilliant read. Glennon Doyle notes that the highest form of praise for women in particular is to be selfless. What a selfless person she is. And then she breaks it down into two words, self and less. So when we are less self, as opposed to being more self, we're praised. She's so selfless. And when you think of a person, you probably have someone in your life like that, she's so selfless. And sorry, guys, I am actually, it often is a woman kind of thing to be selfless. You think of a person that you would really like to be friends with, because you know that she'll always be there for you. She'll be your right-hand man. She'll be your wingman. She'll be there for you. She'll drop everything for you. So the admired state of selfless is very interesting, because the opposite of selfless is selfish. So we've got a selfless person who is maybe an altruistic martyr, cheerful, cheery, always putting other people first, and a selfish person, maybe a self-serving egotist. And it feels like both of those terms are disempowering. So where is the sweet spot of self-empowerment? But could there be a different antonym to selfless? I'd like to propose the term self-filled, but actually we already have a term, and that is self-empowered. So when I'm self-empowered, I know what my needs are. I'm checking on myself. I'm aware of what's happening in me because I spend time by myself thinking about me and what it is that I need. And because I'm self-empowered, I can meet my own needs and perhaps ask for help in meeting those needs. And through that, I cope better. I don't get as sick. And if I choose to be, I can be there for others in a more meaningful way. So perhaps that's the heart of self-empowerment. It's putting our needs front and center in our drive for self-expression and self-care. So we're not going to be selfless. We'd rather be self-empowered, and our actions come from that authentic place inside ourselves. So perhaps to distinguish better the difference between selfish and self-empowered, maybe we can think of an example. So if you think of a selfish person in your life, perhaps you can bring that person to mind. What behaviors make them stand out as selfish? In my mind, I'm thinking of a selfish person as somebody who's quite opinionated, quite loud, quite quick to pass the buck, quite quick to drop you because they've had a better offer, and perhaps even to fob their work off onto you. And then, of course, the shadow question to that is, do you then do the work? Because that then becomes the selfish, selfless dynamic in action. So what would a selfish, self-empowered dynamic look like? If you think about that same person that you had in your mind, that same selfish behaviors, asking you, I'm so sorry, but I've run out of time. Could you please take up the slack on this project? And instinctively, we want to say, yeah, of course, just pass it my way. But a self-empowered person might take a pause and say, well, let me just give that a moment's thought. Can I get back to you on that? And thinking through, what are the consequences for me if I say yes to this? Am I going to work late? Will that mean that I won't have time for that run that I need? Am I going to have to cancel something that was actually quite important for my self-nurturing and my self-care? It's being clear about our boundaries and giving us the power to say no, or to say maybe, or to say yes, and because it aligns with what is right for us as well. So as a cancer survivor and a coach, I work with cancer clients to find their voice within the medical system and also to come to terms with the disease. There's a lot of mind stuff that happens when you have been diagnosed. It's a very tough time. But of course, it's empowering and exciting work as well, because if any of you here are coaches, you'll know that people aren't always that motivated to make changes in their lives, but people are motivated when they come smack bang up against cancer, and they really do want to turn things around. And I always say to people, cancer is a wake-up war. You can't just turn it around. You have to, you can't just go around it. You really do have to you really do have to pay attention to what's happening in your body. But even at this crucial time, at a time where you think that people would put their needs first, that's often not the case. One client said to me, the thing I regret the most is that somehow my breast cancer has damaged my daughters. Now, that might be true when your daughters are 6 and 8 years old, but her daughters were in their 30s at the time. So it doesn't seem like an overriding concern. And what is the limiting belief that underpins that statement? It's that not wanting to be selfish. It's wanting to be selfless, and my needs don't matter, don't count. So part of the work I do with my cancer clients is to identify where the cancer came from. Not an easy question to answer, but somehow everybody seems to know intuitively where the cancer originated from. So burgers, too many burgers, too much bad lifestyle choices, not enough exercise, too many hours in the office, toxic relationships. There's a whole gamut of things that people will often refer to. And here's what 3 of my clients have said when I speak to them about where did your cancer come from. I had to take care of my mom who had dementia for several years. I didn't want to burden my family, so I did all the heavy lifting. There was just no time to take care of myself. Breast cancer. As a vet, I trained in a male-dominated environment in which any feeling for the animals we worked on was not allowed. I squashed down all my womanly authenticity to survive for many, many years. Ovarian cancer. I hate my job. Some days I feel like I'm sleepwalking through my life. But as a man, I need to support my family. Brain cancer. These examples make the case that when we disempower ourselves and neglect our needs in order to show up for the relationship or the person in a way that feels acceptable to them, illness often follows. And this is the impact of trying always to be selfless, abandoning our needs, disempowering ourselves at the same time. Another aspect of disempowerment is often overlooked. When we feel disempowered, we feel helpless. And when we feel helpless, we feel stressed. And we all know that long-term stress is a very bad idea. In his book, When the Body Says No, The Cost of Hidden Stress, Canadian physician Gabor Mate distinguishes between acute stress and chronic stress. Acute stress is a stress emergency, you know, the old tiger story, but also losing your job, leaving your marriage, having a car accident. These are stress emergencies, and then the fight or flight mechanism does what it's meant to do, and you get over it much quicker. But the insidious and more dangerous type of stress, of course, is the chronic type. That is the low grade, more or less continuous stress that we get from overriding our needs. That sense inside ourselves where your body is really saying, no, I don't want to do that. But out of your mouth comes, yes, I'll do that. That's fine. Don't worry about me. And constantly pushing away our needs, our core needs, and doing what might be expected of us and what we think will please people more. Interestingly, Gabor Mate identifies that helplessness, real or perceived, is a potential trigger for a biological stress response. So helplessness doesn't have to be real. It can be perceived that you are helpless in that situation. So again, the bad relationship, bad job idea is that you feel that you're helpless in that situation. You feel, but I need to stick with this relationship. I've been married for so long. I must make this work. Or I can't leave my job because there aren't any good jobs out there. And what this perceived helplessness does to your immune system, and that's been proven scientifically, is it impacts on your natural killer T cells. And these, of course, are the frontline troops of our immune response. And they are dramatically suppressed when chronic stresses are present. So going back to the example of looking after my client looking after a mom for a long time with dementia, so difficult. Caregivers often get sick after they've finished caring for somebody because your needs are nothing in that situation. It's all about the other person. One reaction that cancer patients often have is that their body has somehow betrayed them and that they're victims of some genetic or bad luck. And the medical machinery encourages this sense of disempowerment because even the word patient comes from the Latin, which means to submit. Well, my cancer clients, that's the first thing we let go of. So my coaching clients always refer to themselves as cancer clients. And that is a very different, just changing that word is a very different approach. If you go in as a patient, there's automatically that rank differential between the doctor and yourself. But you are the owner of your own body and you know what has got you to this situation. But whereas being a client, you can shop around, you can challenge their opinion. And as I say to my clients, when you are looking for a hairdresser, you're a client and you shop around. You can do exactly the same with an oncologist. So perhaps think of an area in your life where you feel disempowered. And where is that feeling of disempowerment coming from? Is it externally imposed, or could it be coming from the perceived feeling of helplessness? And how much influence and control could you bring to the situation if you were to step into self-empowerment? So fast forward to 2022, 3 years on. Different receptionist, different me. How can I help you? She says. I'm here to get my mammogram, I say. When were you here last? She asks. Oh, I know this answer. I come every second year, I say. Any changes since your last visit? She asks. Oh, so many, I think. I often ask my cancer clients if they could turn back the clock to before cancer, would they? And what would they do differently? And they say things like resting more and leaving the debilitating job and all the good things. But then they say, you know what? I would probably do it exactly the same way all over again with the same sad result. So what will it take for us to stop disempowering ourselves? Will it take a cancer diagnosis for you to stop disempowering yourself by neglecting self-care? Or can you prioritize self-empowerment and self-care from this moment going forward? And don't wait for a wake-up war to take better care of yourself. Thank you for listening.